The wind howled across Black Ridge, stirring dust devils along the precipice. Catherine Harlow stood with feet planted firmly, her weathered hand gripping the Colt revolver. 30 feet away, Victor Reed's dark duster whipped around his tall frame like the wings of a carrion bird. The approaching sandstorm had turned the sky an unnatural amber. "You killed my husband," Catherine said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Victor's lips curled into that familiar half-smile she had come to despise. A trickle of blood ran from his temple where a rock had grazed him. "Sister," he called over the rising gale, "you still don't understand anything at all." Catherine leveled the Colt. The gunshot cracked like thunder. 3 weeks earlier, the Texas sun hung mercilessly in the cloudless sky as Catherine Harlow drove the rusted spade deeper into the parched earth. Her third attempt at digging a new well was going no better than the first two. The ground beneath her ranch had turned to stone after 18 months of drought. Catherine paused, wiping sweat from her brow. At 38, her face bore the fine lines of a woman who had spent too many years squinting into the sun. She surveyed the meager spread of Harlow Ranch, little more than a two-room cabin with a lean-to addition, a listing barn, and a handful of scraggly cattle grazing on what little vegetation remained. This wasn't the life she had imagined when she'd followed Nathaniel west 5 years ago, but it was hers now. As she gathered her tools, her boot caught an old ammunition box, sending it tumbling. Something slipped from beneath it, a yellowed piece of paper with strange markings and what looked like a partial drawing of a mountain range. In the corner was a symbol she recognized immediately, a sun with an arrow piercing its center, the same symbol engraved on Nathaniel's silver ring. "What were you hiding, Nathaniel?" she whispered to the wind. That evening, Catherine sat at her table with a single oil lamp casting long shadows. She'd laid out the map fragment alongside Nathaniel's journal, a leather-bound book she'd read countless times since his death from consumption 3 years earlier. The journal chronicled his hunting trips into Comanche territory with references to a place called Black Ridge and occasional mentions of someone named T, but nothing that explained the map or the symbol. Catherine ran her fingers over the photograph beside the journal, Nathaniel with their son William in his arms. The boy had been barely 5 when consumption took him, just months before it claimed Nathaniel. She unlocked the small wooden box that held her most precious possessions and removed Nathaniel's silver ring with the sun and arrow symbol. He had worn it on a leather cord around his neck, hidden beneath his clothes. She'd only discovered it when bathing his fever-racked body in those final days. "He needs me," he had muttered in his delirium. "To needs the water. Promise me, Cat." Catherine replaced the ring. Outside, the wind picked up, sending a low moan through the cabin walls. She couldn't leave the small grave behind the house, the resting place of her son, marked with a wooden cross that she repainted each spring. Sometimes she wondered if her skills as a nurse during the war between the states might have saved William and Nathaniel had she not been hampered by the primitive conditions of frontier life. The thought was a familiar thorn in her heart. "I did everything I could," she whispered to the empty room, an affirmation that rang hollow even now. The next morning, Catherine spotted a rider approaching. Her hand moved to the knife at her belt, but relaxed when she recognized Rosa Martinez. "Buenos dias, Catherine," Rosa called, dismounting. "I brought cornmeal, dried beans, and some venison Emilio smoked." "Rosa, you're a godsend," Catherine said, helping unload the provisions. "How is everyone at Copper Creek?" Rosa's expression darkened. "Not good. The Frontier Justice League has been through town. They're hunting Comanche again." Catherine stiffened. The so-called Justice League was little more than bounty hunters led by Victor Reed, a name that never failed to chill her. "They claim the Comanche have been stealing cattle and kidnapping children," Rosa continued. "They took Emilio for questioning yesterday because he trades with them sometimes. Victor Reed said he would return him when he tells them what he knows, but Emilio knows nothing of their camp." "Reed has no authority to detain anyone," Catherine said angrily. Rosa laughed bitterly. "Sheriff Hudson does whatever Reed tells him. Everyone does." She leaned closer. "They say Reed is looking for something specific in Black Ridge." The name sent a jolt through Catherine, the same place in Nathaniel's journal. "What's in Black Ridge?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "I don't know, but be careful, Catherine. They're looking for anyone with connections to the Comanche." After Rosa left, Catherine found herself restless. She checked her ammunition and cleaned Nathaniel's Colt. The connection between Reed, the Comanche, and Black Ridge couldn't be coincidence. As sunset approached, Catherine heard a faint sound carried on the wind, a weak, mewling cry. Her first thought was a coyote had caught something, but as she listened, the cry became more distinct, more human. Catherine had experienced hallucinations after William's death, believing she heard her son crying. But this was different, coming from beyond the northern edge of her property. She grabbed the Colt in a canteen, following the sound as the sun sank. The crying grew louder, unmistakably an infant, punctuated by a deeper, more guttural noise. Catherine crested a small rise and stopped dead. In the hollow below, a Native American man was buried in the hard-packed earth up to his neck, his broad shoulders and head the only parts visible. Beside him, a small bundle squirmed in a shallower pit. An infant, partially buried but still able to move its tiny arms. Catherine took in the fresh footprints and horse tracks. Something metallic caught her eye, a badge discarded in the dirt with the emblem of the Frontier Justice League. Victor Reed's handiwork. The Comanche man's face was streaked with dirt and dried blood, but his dark eyes burned with dignity. He watched Catherine without pleading, measuring her, waiting. The baby's cries grew weaker. Catherine's medical training screamed that the infant needed immediate attention, but helping a Comanche would make her an enemy of the Justice League and the law itself. The baby gave another feeble cry. In that moment, the choice crystallized. Catherine slid down the embankment and began to dig, working quickly against the hard-packed earth. "Hold on, little one," she murmured. "Just hold on." It took nearly 10 minutes of frantic digging to extract the baby, a boy no more than 2 months old, wrapped in a deerskin blanket now soiled with dirt. His breathing was labored, his small body cold despite the lingering heat. Catherine dribbled water from her canteen onto his lips, relieved when he responded with a weak sucking motion. "He's strong," she told the Comanche man, who continued watching her with penetrating eyes. "But he needs proper care." She turned to freeing the man, a far more daunting task as the earth around him had been packed like concrete. "Who are you?" she asked, not expecting an answer. To her surprise, he replied in accented but clear English. "Dakota. The boy is Noshi." Catherine worked in silence for several minutes, the shovel biting into the hardpan. "Why did they do this?" she finally asked. "They say we steal cattle, take children, lies to cover their own evil." A sandstorm was approaching. By the time Catherine had excavated enough earth for Dakota to free his arms, the wind was howling, stinging their faces with sand. With newfound leverage, he helped dig himself out, finally emerging from the earth like some primeval being. He stood over 6 feet tall, his frame lean but powerful despite his ordeal. "You risk much," he said, cradling Noshi against his chest. "They will come for you now." "Let them come," Catherine replied, though her voice betrayed her fear. "We need shelter. My ranch is half a mile east." Dakota nodded once, a gesture of acceptance rather than gratitude. Together they hurried toward the ranch as the sandstorm descended. The cabin creaked under the assault of the storm, sand hissing against the windows. Catherine had sealed the gaps with damp cloths, but fine dust still found its way inside. Dakota sat at her table, drinking water slowly. His face was stoic, but Catherine hadn't missed his wince when he'd sat down. Whatever Reed's men had done before the burial had left its mark. Noshi lay in a makeshift cradle fashioned from a drawer lined with clean linens. Catherine had washed him, treated his abrasions, and fed him diluted goat's milk. His color was improving. "You're a healer," Dakota observed as Catherine prepared a poultice for his back, where deep lash marks crisscrossed the skin. "I was a nurse during the war," she replied. "The closest doctor is 2 days' ride. You learn to make do." Dakota studied her preparations with interest. "Your medicine is not so different from ours. Plants, animal fat, knowledge passed down." As she treated his wounds, her eyes were drawn to a tattoo on his shoulder, a sun with an arrow through its center, identical to the symbol on Nathaniel's ring and the map fragment. Her hands faltered. Dakota noticed immediately. "What troubles you?" he asked. Catherine hesitated, then retrieved Nathaniel's ring and her medical bag. As she opened the bag, Dakota's eyes widened at a small bottle with the same sun and arrow symbol etched into its glass. Where did you get this? He asked sharply. It was my husband's, Catherine replied. Nathaniel Harlow, the ring too. Dakota's expression was guarded, but recognition flickered in his eyes. Your husband, he knew my people? Apparently more than he told me. Catherine showed him the map fragment. I found this today. Dakota stared at the map for a long moment. Your husband was a hunter? That's what he called himself, Catherine said. But his hunting trips often lasted weeks. He wrote about Black Ridge in his journal, but never told me what he found there. Thunder rumbled outside as the sandstorm intensified. Noshi whimpered, and Dakota checked on him before returning to Catherine. The symbol belongs to the protectors, he said finally. Those who guard what is sacred. And what is sacred? Catherine pressed. Why did you help us? Your people would kill you for this. I'm a healer, she said simply. I couldn't leave a child to die. Or you. Even knowing we are Comanche, the enemy of your people? Catherine thought of her son's grave. I've seen too much death to think anyone is my enemy simply because of their birth. Reed and his men buried a baby alive. That makes them my enemy. Dakota seemed to come to a decision. I am not a chief, as your people might think. I am a medicine man. Reed's men attacked our hunting party, killed 2 of my brothers, and took Noshi and me. Why, what does Reed want? The same thing your husband sought in Black Ridge. Before Dakota could elaborate, Noshi began to cry. After Catherine tended to the infant, Dakota continued, his voice low. Reed believes we have stolen children and cattle, but these are lies. What he truly seeks is in Black Ridge. And are you hiding something? Dakota's eyes met hers, unflinching. Yes. A long silence stretched between them. Catherine thought of Nathaniel's last words. Tea needs the water. Promise me, Cat. You knew my husband, didn't you? She asked quietly. Dakota nodded. I knew a man called Nathaniel who came to Black Ridge. Reed will come looking for you, Dakota continued. When the storm passes, he will follow our tracks. You are in danger now because of us. Catherine thought of Rosa's warning about anyone with connections to the Comanche. Then we won't be here when he arrives, she said resolutely. We'll leave at first light. To where? Dakota asked. Catherine held up the map fragment. To Black Ridge, to find what Nathaniel and Reed were both looking for. She didn't tell Dakota about her growing certainty that T in Nathaniel's journal had been Dakota himself, or that the mysterious water might be the key to understanding her husband's secret life, and perhaps his death. Dawn broke with an eerie stillness, the aftermath of the sandstorm leaving drifts of fine sand piled against the eastern side of the cabin. Catherine watched the horizon for riders. Behind her, Dakota was preparing Noshi for the journey. Catherine had spent the night gathering supplies, dried meat, cornmeal, medical supplies, ammunition for the colt. She'd also studied Nathaniel's journal again, finding one passage that caught her attention. April 18th, 1876. T showed me the cave today. I've never seen anything like it. The water is real. Everything they said about it is true. This changes everything. I need to protect this secret for all our sakes. They're coming, Dakota said suddenly. His keen eyes had spotted a distant cloud of dust to the south. Reed? Yes, many riders, moving fast. Catherine grabbed her medical bag, the saddlebag she'd packed, and the small wooden box containing her precious mementos. As they hurried to the barn, she glanced back at William's grave. I'll come back, sweetheart, she whispered. I promise. Your child? Dakota asked. My son, William. He was 5 when consumption took him. Her voice caught. 4 years ago now. Dakota nodded solemnly. Our people believe children's spirits remain close to those who love them. He travels with you still. The horse was a sturdy Morgan mare named Sadie. Catherine mounted first, then helped Dakota climb up behind her, Noshi secure between them. They had just cleared the barn when shouts rose in the distance. Reed's men had arrived. Hang on, she urged, spurring Sadie to a gallop toward the hills that would provide cover. She had just crossed the line from law-abiding citizen to outlaw. Yet as the wind rushed past her face, Catherine felt a sense of purpose stronger than anything she'd experienced since losing her family. Something was waiting in Black Ridge, something important enough for Nathaniel to keep secret and Victor Reed to commit murder. Catherine was determined to discover what it was, no matter the cost. They rode hard through the morning, keeping to low ground and dry washes to hide their tracks. By midday, they reached a small grove surrounding a seep of water emerging from beneath a rocky overhang. They drank gratefully and allowed Sadie to rest. "We've made good time," Catherine said, sinking down against a boulder. "Do you think Reed is still following?" "Reed does not give up," Dakota replied grimly. "He is like a wolf with a scent." As they ate, Catherine studied Dakota's face, the intelligence in his features, the quiet dignity despite his injuries. "You said you're a medicine man," she said. "Were you born to it?" "No, I was a warrior first, but after a vision quest, the spirits called me to healing." He glanced at her medical bag. "You were a healer during your war." "A nurse, yes. I saw things no person should ever see." Catherine's eyes grew distant. "After that, I thought I could face anything. But when William fell ill," her voice faltered, "I couldn't save him. All my training, and I couldn't save my own child." "The greatest medicine man cannot cure every illness," Dakota said quietly. "It does not make his medicine weak. It means some spirits are called home before we are ready." "How did you lose Noshi's mother?" she asked. "Atsila died bringing him into the world. There was bleeding I could not stop." His hand touched Noshi's head. "She named him with her last breath." Catherine recognized the same guilt in his eyes that she carried, the healer's burden of failing those closest to them. "Catherine," Dakota said urgently, "there is something you should know about Reed." The distant sound of hoofbeats interrupted him. Dakota was immediately on his feet. "Riders," he said, coming fast from the south. They quickly packed and mounted Sadie, pushing toward a rocky escarpment ahead. "We cannot outrun them forever," Dakota warned. "We must find a place to hide or stand." He pointed to a narrow canyon. "There. It leads to Black Ridge. The passage is too narrow for more than one rider. We can defend it if needed." They entered the canyon, whose walls rose on either side. The path twisted until widening slightly into a small box canyon with a trickle of water running down one wall. "We make our stand here," Dakota said, dismounting carefully with Noshi. They positioned Sadie at the back of the canyon and quickly constructed a barricade near the entrance. Catherine checked the Colt, 6 shots that needed to count. "Tell me about Reed," she said as they worked. "What does he really want?" "The man you call Victor Reed came to our lands 5 moons ago. He claimed to be hunting renegades, but his questions were always about Black Ridge, about our sacred places." "What's in Black Ridge that's so important?" "Your husband found it first," Dakota replied. "Nathaniel Harlow came to our territory after a snowstorm 4 winters ago, half dead. By our law, we helped him." "Nathaniel was with the Comanche?" Catherine was stunned. "He never told me." "He stayed in our camp for many days, learning our language, our ways. He was curious about our medicine." Dakota touched his tattoo. "He became a friend to our people, the first white man to earn the mark of a protector." Before Catherine could ask more, the sound of approaching horse had echoed through the canyon. Reed had found them. 5 riders appeared at the canyon entrance, led by a tall figure in a black duster. Victor Reed's cold eyes and cruel mouth were visible even at a distance. He was in his mid-40s, with streaks of gray in his dark beard. "Catherine Harlow," Reed's voice boomed against the canyon walls. "I know you're in there with the savage. Come out now and I'll be lenient." "What do you want, Reed?" she called back. Reed nudged his horse forward. "I want what your savage friends stole, what rightfully belongs to civilization, not these heathens." "The only thief I see is you," Catherine replied. "You have no authority to hunt people like animals." Reed laughed harshly. "I have the only authority that matters out here, the authority of strength." His tone hardened. "You're harboring a fugitive accused of kidnapping and theft. Step aside and I'll forget your involvement." Catherine fired a warning shot, the bullet kicking up dust near Reed's horse. "I won't ask again," Reed called, drawing his rifle. "Send out the Comanche and the map." Map. So that's what this was about, the fragment Catherine had found. But how did Reed know about it? "Catherine," Reed called again, his voice conversational. "Did your husband never mention his brother?" "Nathaniel was an only child," she replied automatically. Reed's smile was visible even at this distance, predatory. "Is that what he told you?" Catherine, my dear sister-in-law, your husband had many secrets. The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. Sister-in-law? He's lying, she whispered, more to herself than to Dakota. Is he? Dakota asked quietly. Your husband kept many secrets. The moment of distraction nearly cost them. One of Reed's men fired, the bullet ricocheting off the rock wall inches from Catherine's head. More shots followed. We need to split them up, Dakota said, pointing to a narrow ledge above. I can reach that position and come at them from above. Go, I'll keep them occupied. As Dakota slipped away, Catherine took careful aim. Her first shot caught one of Reed's men in the shoulder, sending him tumbling from his horse. Her second shot missed but spooked another horse, which bolted back down the canyon. Reed and his remaining 2 men took cover behind rocks, returning fire. Bullets whined off stone around Catherine. Your husband betrayed me, Reed shouted between gunshots. Did he tell you that? Did he tell you how he stole what was rightfully mine? Nathaniel would never betray family, Catherine called back, though doubt gnawed at her. Reed's laugh was bitter. Family? He never acknowledged me as family. Not until he needed me. Not until he found something that could make us both rich beyond imagining. Dakota had reached the ledge above Reed's position, but one of Reed's men spotted him and raised his rifle. Catherine fired without hesitation, her bullet finding its mark in the man's chest. He collapsed, his rifle discharging harmlessly into the air. Simultaneously, Dakota launched himself onto the remaining henchman, driving him to the ground. The 2 men grappled in the dust. Reed turned to fire at Dakota, giving Catherine an opening. She aimed at Reed's rifle and fired. The bullet struck the weapon, sending it spinning from his grip. Reed howled, clutching his hand where metal fragments had torn into flesh. Dakota dispatched his opponent with a swift blow to the head. Reed, suddenly alone and unarmed, backed toward the canyon entrance. It's over, Reed, Catherine called, the Colt steady in her hand. Leave now. Reed's face contorted with rage. It's far from over, Catherine. You have no idea what you're involved in. His eyes locked onto hers. Ask your Comanche friend what really happened to Nathaniel. Ask him about the water. What are you talking about? Catherine demanded. Nathaniel didn't die of consumption. Reed's voice echoed through the canyon. I killed him when he betrayed me. And I'll kill you too if you don't bring me that map. With that, he swung onto his horse and galloped away, leaving his men behind. Catherine stood frozen, Reed's words ringing in her ears. Nathaniel murdered? She had nursed him through his final days, watched the consumption drain the life from him just as it had from William, unless what she'd witnessed hadn't been consumption at all. She turned to Dakota. Is it true? Was Nathaniel murdered? Dakota's silence was answer enough. Why didn't you tell me? She demanded, anger rising. Because you were not ready to hear it, Dakota replied quietly. And because we must reach Black Ridge before Reed returns with more men. I'm ready now, Catherine said, holstering the Colt. Tell me everything. What is the water? Why did Victor kill my husband? And why does everyone want that map? Dakota's attention had shifted to the sky, where dark clouds were gathering with unnatural speed. A storm comes, he said. We must find shelter. The slot canyons flood quickly here. This isn't over, Catherine said firmly. You will tell me everything once we're safe. Dakota nodded. Yes, it is time you knew the truth about your husband and about Victor Reed. But first we must reach Silverfall. Silverfall? A place of safety, a sacred place. Dakota glanced toward Noshi's hiding place. And perhaps the answer to many of your questions. They gathered their supplies and Noshi, mounted Sadie, and rode deeper into the canyon as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. Behind them, the wounded man Reed had abandoned called weakly for help, his voice soon drowned by the growing fury of the storm. Catherine's mind raced with Reed's revelations. Whatever waited for them at Silverfall, she was certain nothing in her life would ever be the same. The narrow canyon grew tighter as they pressed onward, the walls rising hundreds of feet on either side. Rain began to fall in earnest, water streaming down the canyon walls and gathering strength with each passing minute. The back path, Dakota urged, pointing to a nearly invisible crack in the western wall. We must hurry. They dismounted to lead Sadie up the steep, twisting trail that switchbacked up the canyon wall. Below them, the canyon floor was already transforming into a churning river as flash flood waters rushed in. After a grueling climb, the path leveled onto a wide ledge sheltered by an overhanging cliff. Dakota guided them deeper into the shelter, where the ground was dry-baked. "We're safe here," he said, gently lowering Noshi onto a bed of soft sand. Catherine sank down, exhausted. Her shoulder throbbed where a bullet had grazed her during the firefight. She watched as Dakota built a small fire using dry wood stored in the alcove. This place had been used as a shelter before. "You knew this was here," she observed. Dakota nodded. "This is the way to Silverfall. My people have used these paths for generations." The fire cast dancing shadows on the rock walls. Outside, the storm raged, but here they were relatively comfortable. Catherine treated her wound, checked on Noshi, and prepared milk for the infant, while Dakota tended to Sadie. When they had settled, Catherine fixed Dakota with a steady gaze across the fire. "It's time for the truth," she said. "All of it." Dakota sat cross-legged, his face solemn. "What Reed said about your husband, it is partly true. Nathaniel and Victor were half-brothers. Same father, different mothers. Why didn't Nathaniel ever tell me?" "Because they were estranged. Victor was the son of your husband's father and a Mexican woman. Born in shame as your people see it. When their father died, Nathaniel inherited everything. Victor received nothing. 5 winters ago," Dakota continued, "Nathaniel came to our territory, injured in a snowstorm. I found him and brought him to our camp to heal." "And he stayed with you? Learned your ways?" Dakota nodded. "He was curious about our medicine, our beliefs. He learned our language quickly. He showed respect where others showed only contempt." The image of Nathaniel living among the Comanche, learning their customs, was almost impossible for Catherine to reconcile with the reserved man she had married. "During his time with us, Nathaniel helped me tend to our sick during a fever. In return, I showed him our sacred places," Dakota said, "including one I should have kept hidden." "The water," Catherine said softly, "what Reed keeps talking about." 5 days' journey into Black Ridge, there is a place called Silverfall, a waterfall that cascades into a hidden cave. The water that flows there is special. "Special how?" "It heals," Dakota said simply. "Not small hurts, but great ones. Sickness that should kill. Wounds that should cripple. Our people have guarded this secret for generations." Catherine frowned. "If such a place existed, it would be famous throughout the territories. We guard it well, and we use it sparingly. To take too much would anger the spirits. And you showed this place to Nathaniel?" Dakota nodded. He had earned the mark of a protector by then. He touched his tattoo. "He swore to keep our secret, to help protect the sacred water from those who would misuse it. But somehow Victor found out." "Yes, Nathaniel returned to your world, but visited our camp many times. On one visit, he brought a sick man with him, his half-brother, though he did not tell me this. The man was in the early stages of lung sickness." "Consumption," Catherine whispered. "Victor had consumption. Nathaniel begged me to help, to show Victor the healing water. I refused. The man's spirit was dark. Nathaniel and I argued bitterly." Dakota's voice grew heavy with regret. In anger, he told Victor about Silverfall anyway, but he refused to draw him a map or take him there directly. "Because he realized you were right about Victor," Catherine guessed. "Yes, Victor wanted to sell the water, to grow rich from others' suffering. Nathaniel tried to stop him, to make him see that the water was sacred, not a commodity." "And that's when Victor killed him?" "Not immediately. Nathaniel created a map to Silverfall but tore it into pieces and hid them in different places. He told me this during his last visit. He said one piece was hidden with you, though you did not know it." Catherine thought of the fragment she'd found beneath the ammunition box, hidden in plain sight. "Victor tortured Nathaniel for the location of the map pieces," Dakota continued grimly. "When that failed, he poisoned him slowly, making it appear as consumption, the same disease that had taken your son." The horror washed over Catherine like ice water. She had watched Nathaniel waste away, believing it was the same disease that had stolen William. All the while, it had been slow murder at the hands of his own brother. "The symptoms would have been similar," Dakota explained. "The poison Victor used causes wasting, difficulty breathing. Your husband knew he was being poisoned, but by then it was too late. That's why he was delirious at the end, Catherine said, remembering Nathaniel's fevered murmurings. "It needs the water. He wasn't talking nonsense. He was trying to tell me about you, about Silverfall. After your husband died, Victor began hunting our people openly, claiming we were thieves and kidnappers. His real purpose was to find someone who could lead him to Silverfall. When he captured me, he demanded I draw him a map. I refused. So he buried you alive with your child," Catherine said angrily, "to make you suffer until you gave him what he wanted. Yes, had you not found us when you did, Noshi would not have survived the night." Catherine absorbed everything Dakota had told her. Her husband's secret life, his murder at the hands of his own brother, the existence of a miraculous healing spring. It was almost too much to comprehend. "If what you say is true," she finally said, "then the water at Silverfall could have saved William. Nathaniel knew about it when our son was dying, and he didn't use it." The accusation hung in the air. Dakota met her gaze steadily. "Nathaniel wanted to bring the water to your son," he said softly. "He begged me, but the journey would have been too dangerous for a child already so sick. And the water must be used soon after it is collected. Its power fades with distance and time." "So he let our son die," Catherine whispered, pain blooming in her chest. "No, he tried to bring your son to the water, but the boy was too weak to travel, and you refused to leave his side." Catherine remembered then Nathaniel's desperate insistence near the end of William's illness that they take him to a special doctor in the West. She had refused, unwilling to move her dying child. "I didn't know," she said, her voice barely audible. "How could I have known? He could not tell you the truth without breaking his oath as a protector," Dakota replied gently. "It tormented him. After your son died, Nathaniel became obsessed with finding a way to bring the water to others without betraying our trust. That is when Victor reappeared in his life, offering help. The fire crackled between them as the storm began to abate outside." "What happens now?" Catherine asked after a long silence. "Reed will come after us with more men. He won't stop until he has the map." "We continue to Silverfall," Dakota said. "It is another day's journey from here. Once there, you will understand why it must be protected at all costs." "And if Reed follows us there?" Dakota's expression hardened. "Then we must be prepared to defend it, as the protectors have always done." Catherine watched as he tended to Noshi with gentle hands. It reminded her of how Nathaniel had been with William, stern in all things except when it came to their son. "We should rest," Dakota said, settling beside the fire with Noshi. "The path to Silverfall is difficult, and we will need our strength." Catherine nodded, though she doubted sleep would come easily. Had Nathaniel not trusted her enough to share his secrets? Or had he been protecting her, as Dakota suggested? As she arranged her bedroll, her hand brushed against the wooden box containing William's lock of hair and Nathaniel's ring. The sun and arrow symbol, the mark of a protector. Her husband had been part of something greater than she had ever imagined. Tomorrow they would continue to Silverfall, and perhaps there she would finally comprehend the full measure of what Nathaniel had discovered and why he had died to protect it. Outside, the storm passed, leaving the desert washed clean. Stars emerged, pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. Catherine stared up at them through a gap in the rock ceiling, wondering if William and Nathaniel were watching her from somewhere among those distant lights. "I'll finish what you started, Nathaniel," she promised silently. "I'll protect what you died for." Dawn broke clear and cool, the storm having scoured away both dust and heat. Catherine woke to find Dakota already up, tending to Noshi and preparing a small meal of cornmeal porridge. They set out as the sun cleared the eastern horizon, leading Sadie along a path that wound higher into the rugged terrain. As they traveled, Catherine thought about what Dakota had told her. One question still nagged at her. "Yesterday, you said Nathaniel was the first white man to become a protector," she said. "What exactly does that mean? What is a protector supposed to do?" "Since the time of our ancestors, certain men and women have been chosen to guard our sacred places, especially Silverfall," Dakota explained. "They carry the mark of the sun and arrow." He touched his shoulder. "The sun represents life. The arrow represents purpose and direction." "And Nathaniel earned this honor?" "Yes. During the fever that swept our camp, he worked without rest to save our children. Many would have died without his help. After that, Our elders agreed he could be trusted with our greatest secret. By midday, they had reached a high plateau that offered a sweeping view of the territory. Dakota pointed to a distant ridge of dark stone. Black Ridge, he said, the heart of it. Silverfall lies within. The ridge appeared formidable, a jagged spine of black rock thrusting up from the earth like the vertebrae of some ancient beast. They began their descent toward it, following a game trail that switched back down the plateau. It was mid-afternoon when they reached the outer canyons of Black Ridge, with walls of black stone streaked with veins of red and orange mineral deposits. "We're close to the inner canyon now," Dakota said, his voice low. "From here we must be silent. Sound carries strangely in these rocks." They had just entered a narrow defile when Dakota froze, raising his hand. "What is it?" Catherine whispered. "Horses," Dakota replied, barely audible. "Coming from ahead." Catherine's blood ran cold. "Could it be your people?" Dakota shook his head. "My people would not bring horses into the inner canyon. It is Reed." "But how?" "He knows these lands better than I thought. He must have circled around while we sheltered from the storm." They retreated to a wider section where several large boulders offered potential cover. They positioned Sadie behind the largest one and hastily constructed a crude barricade. Catherine checked the Colt. 5 bullets remained after yesterday's confrontation. "If things go badly," Dakota said as they crouched behind their makeshift wall, "there is a path behind us that leads to higher ground. Take Noshi and go. I will hold them as long as I can." "I'm not leaving you," Catherine replied firmly. "We face this together." Before Dakota could argue, hoofbeats grew louder. Reed appeared at the mouth of the defile, flanked by 3 riders. Reed's face was haggard, his right hand bandaged where Catherine's bullet had struck his rifle the day before. His eyes were bright with the fever of pursuit as they locked onto the barricade. "Catherine," he called, his voice echoing, "I know you're there. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. Give me the map, and you can walk away." "Why did you kill Nathaniel?" she called back. "Your own brother." Reed's laugh was harsh. "Half-brother, and I killed him because he betrayed me. He found something that could have made us both rich beyond imagining, and he refused to share it." "The water was never meant to be sold," Catherine responded. "It's sacred to the Comanche." "Sacred?" Reed spat on the ground. "It's a resource like any other. Gold, silver, oil. Men who find such things profit from them. That's civilization, Catherine." "Nathaniel understood its true value," she countered. "That's why he protected it from you." Reed's expression darkened. Nathaniel was a fool who went native. The great Nathaniel Harlow, slumming with savages, taking their marks on his body, believing their superstitions. He urged his horse forward a few steps. "Did your Comanche friend tell you everything, Catherine? Did he tell you Nathaniel drank the water himself?" Catherine glanced at Dakota, whose face remained impassive. "What are you talking about?" "Ask him!" Reed's voice rose with anger. "Ask him how Nathaniel was cured of the consumption that took your son. Ask him why Nathaniel wouldn't share that cure with his own brother." "Is this true?" Catherine asked Dakota, her voice barely above a whisper. Dakota's eyes met hers, regret evident in their depths. "Yes. Nathaniel was in the early stages of the lung sickness when he first came to us. The water cured him." The revelation hit Catherine like a physical blow. Nathaniel had been cured of the very disease that had taken William, and then had returned to their ranch and watched their son die of the same illness without using the water to save him. "Enough talk," Reed called, signaling to his men. "Catherine, this is your last chance. The map, or we come in shooting." The moment of decision had arrived. Catherine looked at Dakota, at Noshi secure in his carrier, at the barricade that offered minimal protection against determined attackers. "I need to know one thing first," she called to Reed. "If Nathaniel was cured, why didn't he bring the water to save William?" Reed's face registered surprise, followed by a cruel smile. "You really don't know, do you? Your precious husband tried. He stole water from Silverfall against their sacred laws." He jerked his head toward Dakota. "But his new friends caught him. They punished him, kept him prisoner for weeks. By the time he escaped, your son was already dead." Catherine turned to Dakota, searching his face for denial, but finding only solemn confirmation. "It is true," Dakota said quietly. "Nathaniel broke his oath as a protector. The elders imprisoned him until he recognized his error. I argued for his release, but was overruled. And you never told me, Casarin whispered, a hollow feeling spreading through her chest. There was no purpose in adding to your grief, Dakota replied softly. Nathaniel made his peace with what happened. He understood that the water is not meant to save everyone, only those the spirits choose. Time's up, Reed shouted, raising his rifle. Make your choice, Catherine. In that moment of confused betrayal, Catherine made her decision. She stood slowly, raising her hands. I'll give you the map, she called, but you let Dakota and the child go free. Catherine, no, Dakota hissed, grabbing her arm. You cannot trust him. She pulled away. I don't trust any of you right now, but I won't let a child die for your secrets. Reed grinned triumphantly. A wise choice. Come forward with the map. Catherine began to move toward the barricade's edge, but Dakota lunged forward, tackling her to the ground just as Reed's men opened fire. Bullets thudded into the rocks where she had been standing moments before. He was never going to let us go, Dakota said grimly, drawing a knife. Reed wants no witnesses. Catherine rolled to the side and fired twice in rapid succession. One bullet struck a rider in the leg, sending him tumbling from his horse with a scream. The other shot went wide but caused enough confusion for Dakota to dart to a new position. Reed and his remaining man dismounted, taking cover as they returned fire. Each gunshot thundered in the confined space of the canyon. You're outnumbered and outgunned, Catherine, Reed shouted. Be reasonable. A bullet ricocheted near her head. 3 bullets left, not enough to fight their way out. No, she began to cry, spurring Dakota to action. He scaled a boulder with surprising agility and leaped down onto one of Reed's men, driving his knife deep into the man's shoulder. The wounded man howled in pain, his rifle discharging harmlessly. Reed whirled and fired at Dakota, who barely managed to dive behind cover. The bullet grazed his arm. Nathaniel didn't die of consumption, Reed shouted, his voice bouncing off the canyon walls. I poisoned him slowly, made it look natural, just like I'll do to you if you don't give me that map. His confession, delivered in the heat of battle, seemed to surprise even Reed himself. Wikikai, she called back, partly to distract him while Dakota circled to a new position. Why kill your own brother? Because he betrayed me, Reed's voice cracked with emotion. I begged him for the water. I'm dying, Catherine. The same consumption that took your son is eating away at my lungs. Nathaniel could have saved me with a single drink from Silverfall, but he refused. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Reed was dying of consumption, the same disease that had claimed William, the same disease Nathaniel had been cured of. He said the water wasn't meant for men like me, Reed continued bitterly, as if he had the right to judge who deserves to live and who deserves to die. Catherine understood the depth of Reed's desperation. This wasn't just about greed, it was about survival. Dakota had worked his way around behind Reed's position, but Reed's remaining man spotted him and raised his rifle. Catherine stood and fired her remaining bullets in quick succession, hitting the man in the chest. He crumpled to the ground. Reed spun toward her, his own rifle rising. Dakota seized the opportunity, launching himself at Reed from behind. The 2 men crashed to the ground, grappling for control of the rifle. A shot rang out, then another. Catherine rushed forward. Reed and Dakota lay tangled together, blood spreading beneath them. For one terrible moment, she couldn't tell who had been hit. Then Dakota pushed himself up, grimacing in pain. Reed lay still, a crimson stain spreading across his chest where his own rifle had discharged during the struggle. His eyes stared sightlessly at the canyon walls. Are you hit? Catherine asked, kneeling beside Dakota. Not badly, he replied, though his pallor suggested otherwise. The bullet only grazed my side. Catherine examined the wound. It was more than a graze. The bullet had carved a deep furrow across his ribs. Without treatment, infection would set in quickly. We need to get you to shelter, she said, binding the wound with strips torn from her petticoat. Is Silverfall far? Beyond the next ridge, Dakota said, his breathing labored. Perhaps 2 hours on foot. Catherine looked at Reed's body. The man had been a murderer, yet his desperation was born of the same fear that had driven her when William fell ill, the primal terror of watching someone slip away, powerless to stop it. He was telling the truth about being sick, wasn't he? She asked as she helped Dakota to his feet. Yes, Dakota confirmed. I could see the signs when he captured us, the beginning stages of lung sickness. They collected Noshi and their few belongings, including the precious map fragment. Reed said Nathaniel stole water from Silverfall to try to save William, she said as they began their journey deeper into Black Ridge. Is that true? Yes, he broke his oath as a protector, but he was caught before he could leave our territory. And you imprisoned him while our son died. There was no accusation in her voice now, only weariness. It was not my decision, Dakota replied softly. I argued for his release, but the elders would not be swayed. The water must not leave Silverfall. That is our most sacred law. Why? What makes this water so special that it's worth lives? Dakota met her gaze steadily. You will understand when you see it. Some things cannot be explained with words alone. They continued in silence, Dakota leaning heavily on Catherine as his strength waned. The wound in his side was taking its toll, his breathing becoming more labored. Noshi began to fuss, sensing his father's distress. The sun was setting when they reached what appeared to be a dead end, a sheer wall of black stone blocking the canyon. Dakota directed Catherine to a narrow crevice, barely visible in the deepening shadows. Through there, he said, his voice weak. Silverfall lies beyond. The crevice opened into a passage so narrow they had to turn sideways to navigate it. Dakota going first with Noshi, Catherine leading Sadie behind them. The narrow crevice opened into darkness. Catherine could feel the cool, damp air brushing against her face as she guided Sadie through the tight passage. Ahead, Dakota moved with painful slowness, one hand pressed against his wounded side, the other cradling Noshi against his chest. The sound of flowing water grew louder with each step. Almost there, Dakota said, his voice strained, just beyond this turn. The passageway suddenly widened, and Catherine gasped. They stood in a vast underground chamber, dimly lit by phosphorescent algae growing on the wet stone walls. A waterfall cascaded from an opening high above, its waters glowing with an ethereal blue-green light as they tumbled into a perfectly circular pool below. The air was filled with a fine mist that tasted faintly of minerals. Silverfall, Dakota said, gesturing weakly toward the shimmering waters. Catherine helped him to a flat stone near the pool's edge. In the strange light, she could see how pale he had become, his buckskin shirt dark with blood where the bullet had torn across his ribs. Noshi had fallen into an exhausted sleep, oblivious to the wonders around him. The water, Dakota murmured, gesturing toward the pool. For the wound. Catherine knelt beside the pool. The water was crystal clear, despite its luminescent quality, and strangely warm when she dipped her fingers into it. She filled her canteen and returned to Dakota's side. Gently, she peeled back the blood-soaked bandage. The wound was worse than she'd initially thought, an angry furrow that exposed the white gleam of rib bone. She poured the glowing water over the wound. Dakota hissed in pain, then relaxed, his face softening with relief. Catherine stared in amazement as the bleeding slowed before her eyes, the torn edges of flesh beginning to knit together. How is this possible? She whispered. Dakota managed a small smile. The spirits blessed this place long ago. The water carries their healing power. Catherine redressed the wound, which now looked days rather than hours old. Dakota's breathing had eased, and color was returning to his face. She sat back on her heels, surveying the cavern with new eyes. This was what Reed had been willing to kill for, what Nathaniel had died protecting. The water truly healed Nathaniel's consumption, she said. Not a question, but a statement. Dakota nodded. Yes, he came to us coughing blood, wasting away. 2 drinks from the spring and the sickness retreated. A week and he was completely healed. And yet he watched our son die of the same disease. The old pain surfaced again, sharper now with the knowledge that a cure had existed. Your husband loved your son more than his own life, Dakota said quietly. When William fell ill, Nathaniel came to me immediately. He begged to bring the boy to Silverfall, but the journey was too dangerous for a child so sick. So he tried to take the water to William instead, Catherine said, remembering Reed's revelation. Dakota sighed deeply. Yes, against our sacred law, against his oath as a protector, he attempted to carry water from Silverfall. But the water loses its power quickly once removed from this place, and he was caught by our warriors before he could leave our territory. You imprisoned him. The elders did. I argued against it, but they were adamant. Breaking the oath of a protector is our gravest offense. Dakota's eyes reflected the blue glow of the pool. By the time I convinced them to release him, weeks had passed. He returned to your home to find William gone. Catherine felt tears welling in her eyes. The weight of what might have been, William alive, their family intact, pressed down on her chest like a stone. Why didn't he tell me about this place, about what happened? Shame, grief, and fear that you would blame our people for your son's death. Dakota reached out, his hand covering hers. Nathaniel carried that burden alone. When he returned to us, he was changed, determined that no one else should suffer as you had. Is that when he began working on ways to transport the water? Yes, he studied our medicines, searching for a way to preserve its power outside the cave. Dakota gestured toward Catherine's medical bag. The bottle with our symbol, it was his attempt to create a vessel that could maintain the water's healing properties. Did it work? Dakota shook his head. Not completely. The water would remain potent for a day, perhaps two, but no longer. Not enough to take it far from Black Ridge. Catherine tried to imagine Nathaniel's desperation. His son dead, the miracle cure just beyond his reach, working frantically to find a solution that might save others, even if it had come too late for William. It cast her husband in a new light, one that made his secretiveness more understandable, if no less painful. And Victor Reed, she asked, how did he enter the picture? Dakota's expression darkened. Reed found Nathaniel here 6 months ago. He was already ill with the same sickness. How he discovered his half-brother's connection to us, I do not know. But he demanded Nathaniel share the secret of Silverfall with him. And Nathaniel refused. He offered to bring Reed here to let him drink from the spring and be healed. But only if Reed swore never to reveal its existence to others. Dakota's voice grew bitter. Reed wanted more. He saw only profit, a miraculous healing water he could bottle and sell to the desperate and dying. Catherine remembered Reed's rage in the canyon, his accusation that Nathaniel had judged who deserved to live and who deserved to die. So Nathaniel denied him. Yes, he told Reed he would rather let his own brother die than allow the sacred waters to be desecrated. Dakota looked troubled. Perhaps he was too harsh. But he had seen what the water's power could do in the wrong hands. So Reed decided if he couldn't have the water, he would take Nathaniel's life instead. He poisoned him slowly with a toxin that mimics the wasting of lung sickness. By the time Nathaniel realized what was happening, it was too late. The poison had gone too deep for even Silverfall's waters to heal. Dakota's voice dropped to a near whisper. He died knowing Reed would never stop searching for this place. That's why he tore the map into pieces, Catherine said, understanding dawning, to make sure Reed couldn't find Silverfall even after his death. Yes, he hid the fragments in different places, telling no one where they all were. He trusted that Reed would never find them all. Catherine pulled the map fragment from her pocket, studying it in the blue glow of the cavern. It showed only a portion of the route to Silverfall, useless without the other pieces. How many fragments are there? 4, Dakota replied. Yours is the first piece showing the beginning of the path. The second piece Nathaniel hid among our people. The third, he hesitated. The third he gave to someone in Copper Creek, though he never told me who. And the fourth he kept with him always. Reed must have found it when he killed Nathaniel, Catherine reasoned. I believe so, which is why he hunts our people so desperately now. He needs the second piece, and he believes one of us knows where it is. Catherine was silent for a long moment, absorbing everything Dakota had told her. The intricate web of deceit, sacrifice, and betrayal surrounding Silverfall's waters was almost too much to comprehend. Yet one question remained unanswered. Why can't the water leave this place? What makes it lose its power? Dakota gestured toward the glowing pool. Look closely at the water. What do you see? Catherine leaned forward, studying the luminescent surface. At first, she saw only the gentle ripples from the falling water. Then she noticed something else. Tiny motes of light like suspended fireflies, swirling in complex patterns beneath the surface. What are they? She asked, mesmerized. The spirits of the water, Dakota replied simply. They cannot survive long away from their home. The farther the water travels from this pool, the faster they fade, and with them, the healing power. It sounded like superstition, yet Catherine had just witnessed the water's miraculous effect on Dakota's wound. Who was she to dismiss his explanation? When your people speak of spirits, she said carefully, do you mean God's presence or something else? Dakota considered this. Your people see one great spirit. We see many spirits in all things, water, stone, sky. Perhaps they are all faces of the same truth, viewed through different eyes. The philosophical response surprised Catherine. She had expected something more rigid, more dogmatic. Instead, Dakota offered a bridge between their worldviews, one that invited understanding rather than conflict. A soft cry from Noshi interrupted their conversation. The infant had awakened and was fussing, likely hungry. Catherine prepared some milk while Dakota soothed his son, humming a gentle melody that echoed hauntingly through the cavern. As Catherine handed the milk to Dakota, she noticed him studying her face with an odd expression. What is it? She asked. You have not asked about the mark, Dakota said. What mark? On Noshi's hand, the mark you have been staring at since you first saw him. Catherine had indeed noticed a small birthmark on the baby's tiny palm, a crescent-shaped discoloration that had immediately reminded her of the identical mark William had carried. But she had dismissed it as coincidence, too afraid to acknowledge the strange feeling of connection it had stirred in her. It's similar to a mark my son had, she admitted quietly. Dakota nodded as if confirming something to himself. Our people believe that when a young spirit leaves too soon, it may return in another form, not the same person, but carrying echoes of who they were. Catherine stared at the infant, at the familiar curve of his eyelashes, the determined set of his tiny jaw. Are you saying that that he carries some part of William's spirit? I am saying that nothing truly ends, Dakota replied gently. The water flows, changes form, returns to the sky, falls again as rain. So too with spirits. It was not a direct answer, but it offered a comfort Catherine hadn't realized she needed. The idea that some essential part of William might continue, might be witnessed in the new life she had helped save, eased a tightness in her chest that had been there for 4 long years. She reached out tentatively, and Noshi grasped her finger with surprising strength, his wide eyes meeting hers with an innocent curiosity that made her heart ache with both grief and joy. Outside, beyond the sanctuary of Silverfall, Reed's body lay cooling in the canyon, but his men would be wondering what had become of their leader. And when he didn't return, they would come looking. The respite offered by the sacred pool was temporary. The battle for Silverfall's future was far from over. They spent the night in the cavern, resting on soft sand that had accumulated near the pool's edge. Catherine slept fitfully, her dreams filled with flowing water, and William's laughter echoing through unseen chambers. She woke before dawn, disoriented by the timeless quality of the underground space, where the only light came from the glowing algae and the luminescent pool. Dakota was already awake, sitting cross-legged by the water with Noshi asleep beside him. His wound looked remarkably better. What had been a raw, bleeding gash was now a healing scar. The water's power was undeniable. How long have you been up? Catherine asked, joining him by the pool. Time moves differently here, Dakota replied, but not long. He gestured toward the water. I have been thinking about what comes next. Reed's men will be looking for him, Catherine said. When they find his body, they'll come searching for us. Yes, and they will not be gentle in their questioning of my people or yours. Dakota's expression was grave. The secret of Silverfall has been kept for generations. Now, in the span of a few seasons, it has been discovered by 3 outsiders. Nathaniel protected your secret, Catherine pointed out. At the cost of his life, Dakota acknowledged. The question is whether the secret can be protected at all, now that others know of its existence. Catherine understood his concern. Reed might be dead, but his men remained. And if word of a miraculous healing spring spread, others would come. Prospectors, the sick and desperate, the merely curious. The pristine sanctuary would be trampled, exploited, perhaps destroyed in the frenzy to claim its powers. What if we redirected the water, she suggested, changed its course so it no longer flows into this pool? Dakota shook his head. The spirits are bound to this place, not just the water that passes through it. Moving the flow would not hide its power. Then we seal the entrances, make it impossible to reach. Perhaps, but secrets have a way of being uncovered, especially those as valuable as this one. Dakota looked troubled. There is another option, though it pains me to consider it. What's that? We let the knowledge spread, but in a controlled way. Seeing Catherine's surprise, he continued, not the location, that remains secret, but the existence of healing waters in Comanche territory becomes known. A truth wrapped in legend, too diffused to track to its source. How would that help? When many speak of something but none can find it, it becomes a story, not a destination. Seekers waste their energy chasing phantoms while the truth remains hidden. Dakota picked up a stone and dropped it into the pool, watching the ripples spread. It is how other sacred places have been protected when secrecy alone failed. The strategy was clever, creating a smokescreen of rumor to obscure the real prize, but it required careful management. That might work for outsiders, Catherine said. But what about Reed's men? They know too much already. They know their leader was hunting something in Black Ridge. They do not know exactly what or where. Dakota's expression hardened. But you are right. They are the immediate threat. We need to return to civilization, Catherine decided, to warn your people and mine. If Reed's men think you have the second map piece, they'll come for your tribe first. Dakota nodded slowly. Yes, my people must be warned, but first there is something you should see. He stood surprisingly steady on his feet, considering his wound the day before. Come, there is another chamber. He led her deeper into the cavern, along a narrow path that wound behind the waterfall. The mist was thick here, clinging to their clothes and skin. Beyond the falls, the passage opened into a smaller chamber that took Catherine's breath away. The walls were covered with paintings, hundreds of them, some faded with age, others vivid as if completed yesterday. They depicted people drinking from the pool, their ailments represented by dark shadows that the glowing water washed away. Other images showed guardians with sun and arrow symbols protecting the cave from intruders. The most ancient paintings, barely discernible now, seemed to show the original discovery of the spring, figures kneeling before the glowing pool in wonder. The history of Silver Falls, Dakota explained. Each generation of protectors adds to it. These newest ones, he pointed to a section where the paint still looked fresh, were made by Nathaniel. Catherine moved closer, her heart racing. The painting showed a man leading a woman and small boy toward the pool. Though simple in execution, there was no mistaking the subjects. Nathaniel had painted himself bringing Catherine and William to Silverfall. He made this after William died, Dakota said softly. Not what was, but what he had wished for. Catherine touched the painted figures, her fingers coming away with a faint blue residue. Nathaniel had dreamed of bringing them here, of saving their son. Even in his final months, he had been consumed by that unrealized hope. Beside the scene was another. Nathaniel passing a vessel of glowing water to a female figure dressed in what appeared to be a nurse's attire. Catherine recognized herself again, this time administering the healing water to a row of indistinct patients. He believed you would carry on his work, Dakota said, finding a way to share Silver Fall's blessing without betraying its sanctity. I'm not sure I can, Catherine admitted. I don't have his knowledge of your medicines or this place. But you have his compassion, his determination. Dakota's voice was gentle but insistent. And you have something he did not. My willing help. Catherine looked at him sharply. You would help me find a way to take the water from Silverfall? Not take, carry. There is a difference. Dakota pointed to another painting, this one showing the sun and arrow symbol inside what appeared to be a vessel of some kind. Nathaniel was close to a solution. With your knowledge of medical preparations and my understanding of the spirits, we might succeed where he could not. The proposition was startling. After all Dakota had said about the sacredness of keeping the water at its source, his willingness to continue Nathaniel's work suggested a significant shift in thinking. What changed your mind? She asked. The world is changing, Dakota replied simply. The old ways of absolute secrecy cannot hold forever. Better to find a controlled path forward than to be swept away by forces we cannot stop. He met her gaze directly. And I have seen your heart, Catherine Harlow. You would not misuse this gift as Reed would have. The trust implicit in his words moved her deeply. This man, who had every reason to distrust her kind, was offering a partnership that could change countless lives. It was what Nathaniel had wanted, a bridge between their worlds, a way to share Silver Fall's healing without destroying its source. "I will help you," she said firmly. "But first, we need to deal with Reed's men and secure the remaining map pieces. Until Silverfall is truly safe, we can't risk experimenting with its water." Dakota nodded, satisfied with her priorities. "Then we should leave soon. My wound had healed enough for travel, thanks to the water." "Where do we go first? To your tribe or to Copper Creek?" "My people are nomadic. They will have moved their camp since I was captured. But I know where to find them." Dakota considered. "Copper Creek is closer, though more dangerous for us. Reed's influence runs deep there." "But the third map piece is in Copper Creek," Catherine pointed out. "If we could secure it, we'd have 3 of the 4 fragments." "True, and I must find Emilio Martinez, if he still lives. I owe him a debt for his kindness to our people." The mention of Rosa's husband reminded Catherine of the woman's concern for her missing spouse. If Reed had been holding Emilio for information about the Comanche, what had become of him after Reed's departure? "Then we go to Copper Creek," Catherine decided, "but carefully. Reed's men will be watching the trails." They gathered their meager supplies and prepared to leave the sanctuary of Silverfall. Catherine filled her canteen with the glowing water, knowing it would lose its potency within a day, but unwilling to leave without some small portion of its miracle. As they made their way back through the narrow crevice that served as the cave's entrance, Catherine cast one last look at the shimmering pool. Nathaniel had given his life to protect this place. Now it fell to her to carry on that protection while finding a way to share its blessing with a world desperately in need of healing. Outside, the sun was climbing toward its zenith, bathing Black Ridge in harsh light. They mounted Sadie, who had rested and recovered her strength overnight. With Noshi secured between them, they began the careful journey back through the winding canyons, alert for any sign of Reed's men. "We should reach Copper Creek by nightfall if we ride steady," Catherine said. "I know a place on the outskirts where we can stay hidden while we gather information." Dakota nodded, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Reed's men will not expect us to head toward the town. They will be searching the wilderness for their leader." "Let's hope you're right. We need that advantage." They rode in companionable silence for several miles, each lost in their own thoughts. Catherine found herself reflecting on the strange turns her life had taken in just a few short days. She had gone from isolated widow to fugitive, from nursing old grievances to nurturing new possibilities. The weight of William's death seemed lighter somehow, not gone, but transformed by the knowledge that Nathaniel had tried everything in his power to save their son. And then there was Dakota, a man who should have been her enemy, but was rapidly becoming something else entirely. His quiet strength, his wisdom, and his devotion to Noshi had awakened feelings in Catherine she had thought long buried with Nathaniel. "You are troubled," Dakota observed, breaking the silence. "Just thinking," she replied, "about how quickly everything has changed." "The river is always changing, yet always the same," he said, quoting what seemed to be a Comanche saying. "So too with our lives." Catherine smiled at the philosophical response. "I was also thinking about what comes next. If we succeed in protecting Silverfall and finding a way to transport its water, what then? Where do I go from there?" It was a question she hadn't allowed herself to consider until now. Her ranch was likely no longer safe. Her life as she had known it was over. The future stretched before her, unwritten and uncertain. "Where does the river go when it leaves the mountain?" Dakota asked in return. "It follows the path before it, joining with others, nourishing what it touches along the way." "That's not really an answer," Catherine pointed out with a small laugh. "It is the only answer that matters," Dakota replied, a hint of humor in his voice. "The next step will become clear when you reach it." Their philosophical exchange was cut short as they rounded a bend and came face to face with 2 riders. Men Catherine recognized immediately as part of Reed's gang. The surprise was mutual, all 4 freezing for a split second before reacting. "It's the Harlow woman," one man shouted, "and the savage! Where's Reed?" "Savage?" "Reed," demanded the other, drawing his pistol. Catherine spurred Sadie hard to the right, toward a narrow side canyon. "Ride," she urged, as bullets kicked up dust around them. The chase was on, their peaceful journey shattered in an instant. The two riders gave pursuit, shouting for Catherine to stop. But Sadie was swift despite her burden, and Catherine knew these canyons well enough to seek the narrower passages where larger horses might struggle. They rounded another bend, and Catherine spotted a low opening in the canyon wall, a drainage tunnel barely large enough for them to pass through while mounted. "There," she called, pointing. "Duck low!" Dakota pressed himself against Sadie's neck, sheltering Noshi with his body as Catherine guided the horse into the tight space. The tunnel was dark and low, scraping their shoulders as they rode through, but it opened into a dry wash beyond, out of sight of their pursuers. They could hear the men shouting in frustration behind them, unable to follow through the narrow passage. But Catherine knew they would ride around, seeking another way to intercept their quarry. "We need to change direction," she said, guiding Sadie up the steep bank of the wash. "They'll be expecting us to continue toward Copper Creek." Dakota pointed to a ridge to the north. "Over that rise is a series of box canyons, many entrances, many exits, easy to lose pursuers." Catherine nodded, turning Sadie toward the ridge. "Lead the way." Their detour would add hours to their journey, but better that than riding straight into an ambush. The encounter had confirmed their fears. Reed's men were actively searching for them, and news of their leader's death had not yet reached them. When it did, the hunters would only grow more determined to find the people responsible. The race to secure Silver Fall's secrets had taken on a new urgency. The sanctity of the healing spring, the fate of Dakota's people, and their own lives all hung in the balance. And somewhere in Copper Creek waited the third piece of the map, a piece they needed to ensure Silver Fall's protection. As they climbed the rocky slope toward the ridge, Catherine felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. For the first time since losing William and Nathaniel, she had a purpose greater than mere survival. Whatever came next, she would face it not alone, but with Dakota beside her, an unlikely ally who was quickly becoming something far more important. By late afternoon, they had successfully navigated the maze of box canyons and emerged several miles east of Copper Creek. The detour had cost them valuable time, but they had seen no further sign of Reed's men. Now they approached the town cautiously, keeping to the cover of scattered piñon pines that dotted the hillsides. "We can't ride directly into town," Catherine said, studying the settlement from their vantage point. "Too many eyes, too many questions." Copper Creek was a modest frontier town, a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a handful of side streets, and scattered homesteads on the outskirts. The steeple of a small church rose above the other structures, and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer carried on the still air. It appeared peaceful enough, but Catherine knew appearances could be deceiving. Reed's influence would run deep here. "There," she said, pointing to a small cabin set apart from the main settlement. "That's Rosa Martinez's place. If anyone will help us, she will." They approached the Martinez homestead from behind, using a dry creek bed for cover. No smoke rose from the chimney, and no movement was visible around the modest cabin. Catherine dismounted, signaling for Dakota to wait with Noshi and Sadie while she investigated. She crept to the back door and knocked softly. "Rosa, it's Catherine Harlow." No response. Catherine tried the door and found it unlocked, unusual in these parts, where even the most trusting settlers secured their homes against the elements and wild animals, if not human intruders. Inside, the cabin was neat, but showed signs of a hasty departure. Dishes sat half-washed in a basin, and a shawl had been left draped across a chair. On the table lay an overturned coffee cup, its contents long dried into a dark stain on the wooden surface. "They left in a hurry," Catherine murmured to herself. Had Rosa found Emilio? Or had something more sinister occurred? A floorboard creaked behind her. Catherine whirled, reaching for the Colt before remembering she had spent her last bullets in the canyon battle with Reed. Dakota stood in the doorway, Noshi cradled in one arm. "No one is here," she told him unnecessarily. "But they didn't leave willingly, I think." "The town seems quiet," Dakota observed. "Too quiet for this time of day." Catherine nodded. The usual sounds of commerce and conversation that should carry from Copper Creek's main street were notably absent. Something wasn't right. "I'll go into town," she decided. "You stay here with Noshi. You draw too much attention." Dakota frowned. It could be dangerous. I'm just a widow running errands, Catherine replied. No one will look twice at me. But I need to know what's happening before we make our next move. Dakota reluctantly agreed, settling in the cabin with Noshi while Catherine tidied her appearance as best she could. Her clothes were travel-worn and dusty, but she smoothed her hair and pinched color into her cheeks, transforming herself back into the respectable widow the townspeople would recognize. She walked the half-mile to town, alert for any sign of trouble. The first indication that something was seriously amiss came at the edge of town, where a hastily painted sign had been nailed to a post. Meeting at church. All citizens required to attend by order of Sheriff Hudson. That explained the unusual quiet. The entire town had been summoned to the church. But for what purpose? Catherine made her way cautiously to the white clapboard building, hearing voices raised in argument before she even reached the steps. She slipped in through a side door and stood at the back, taking in the scene. The church was packed, every pew was filled, and more people stood along the walls. At the front, Sheriff Samuel Hudson, a heavy-set man in his 60s with a perpetually harried expression, was trying to maintain order as several men shouted questions at him. "What proof do you have that it was Comanches?" demanded one voice Catherine recognized as belonging to the town's doctor. "3 men dead, scalped in the same way they always do it," replied another man, Jenkins, one of Reed's closest lieutenants. "What more proof do you need?" "Reed's been claiming Comanche trouble for months with nothing to show for it," the doctor persisted. "And now he's conveniently not here when his men find these bodies." Sheriff Hudson raised his hands for quiet. "Folks, please, we need to proceed in an orderly fashion. Mr. Jenkins has brought serious accusations, and we need to consider our response carefully. The only response is to form a posse and hunt down every last one of them savages," shouted a red-faced man near the front. "Reed was right all along." Catherine felt her blood run cold. Reed's men had found their leader's body and were blaming the Comanche for his death. They were whipping the town into a frenzy, preparing for what would amount to a massacre of Dakota's people. Her eyes scanned the crowd, looking for allies. She spotted Rosa Martinez sitting near the middle, her face tight with worry. Beside her was a thin man with a bandaged arm, whom Catherine assumed must be Emilio, finally returned home. There was no sign of the third map piece, but Catherine hadn't expected it to be so easily visible. Sheriff Hudson was speaking again, his voice strained. "Now, I know emotions are running high, but we need to confirm these reports before taking action. Mr. Jenkins, you say you found Victor Reed's body in Black Ridge Canyon?" "What was left of it," Jenkins replied grimly. "Comanches stripped him, took his boots, his guns, everything of value. Same with the other 2 boys. Left him for the vultures." It was a blatant lie, but an effective one. Catherine had seen Reed die from his own rifle during the struggle with Dakota. There had been no scalping, no looting of bodies. Reed's men were fabricating atrocities to justify an attack on the Comanche. "And you're sure it was Comanches?" the doctor pressed. "Not bandits or other outlaws?" Jenkins spat on the floor. "We found tracks, moccasin prints, unshod ponies, and that medicine man Reed captured was there, the one that escaped from Reed's custody with help from a white woman." A murmur ran through the crowd. Catherine shrank back slightly, though no one had turned to look at her yet. "What white woman?" Sheriff Hudson asked, frowning. "Don't rightly know," Jenkins lied smoothly. "But Reed suspected someone in these parts was helping the Comanches. Might even be among us right now." The atmosphere in the church grew tense, people glancing suspiciously at their neighbors. Catherine knew she needed to act quickly. If Reed's men organized a posse and located Dakota's tribe, there would be bloodshed, and any hope of protecting Silverfall would be lost. She caught Rosa's eye, giving a small nod of recognition. Rosa's eyes widened, but she quickly composed her expression, murmuring something to Emilio. The man stiffened and turned slightly, catching sight of Catherine by the door. His gaze was cautious but not hostile. Sheriff Hudson was trying to restore order again. "Now, before we decide anything, What we need is action," Jenkins interrupted. "Reed was killed while trying to protect this town. Are you going to dishonor his memory by sitting on your hands?" "No one's sitting on anything," Hudson replied testily. "But I won't have a bloodbath on my conscience without making sure we're going after the right people." "The right people?" Jenkins sneered. "You mean the savages who've been stealing our cattle, kidnapping our children and now killing our citizens? Those right people? Catherine couldn't remain silent any longer. Before she could consider the wisdom of her actions, she stepped forward into the aisle. "That's not true," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. Every head in the church turned toward her. Sheriff Hudson squinted. "Catherine Harlow? What in tarnation are you doing here? Thought you never left that ranch of yours." "I came because I heard Victor Reed was causing trouble," she replied, walking slowly toward the front of the church. "And it seems I was right." Jenkins' face darkened. "Watch your mouth, woman. Reed was a hero." "Reed was a murderer," Catherine said clearly, "and a liar. He wasn't killed by Comanche. He died in a gunfight that he started." A shocked silence fell over the assembly. Even Jenkins seemed momentarily at a loss for words. "And how would you know that, Mrs. Harlow?" Sheriff Hudson asked carefully. "Because I was there." Catherine had reached the front now, turning to face the crowd. "Reed and his men attacked me and a Comanche man who was under my protection. Reed died when his own rifle discharged during the struggle." "She's lying to protect the savages." Jenkins recovered his voice. "This is the woman who helped that medicine man escape. I helped a man and his infant son who had been buried alive by Reed and his thugs," Catherine corrected, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "An innocent child, Jenkins. How does that fit with your tale of Comanche savagery?" The crowd murmured, some expressions changing from anger to uncertainty. Catherine pressed her advantage. "Victor Reed has been lying to all of you. There have been no stolen cattle, no kidnapped children. He created those stories to justify hunting the Comanche, but his real purpose was something else entirely." "And what might that be?" Sheriff Hudson asked, genuinely curious now. Catherine hesitated. She couldn't reveal the truth about Silverfall, not here, not to everyone, but she needed to provide an explanation that would satisfy them. "Reed was looking for something valuable in Comanche territory," she said carefully, "something he believed would make him rich. When he couldn't find it, he became desperate, willing to torture and kill to get what he wanted." "That's horse shit," Jenkins spat. "Reed was protecting this town." "From what?" Catherine challenged. "When was the last time anyone here actually saw a Comanche raiding party? When was the last stolen child found? The last mutilated body before these convenient deaths you are reporting now?" Her questions were met with uncomfortable silence. Even the most aggressive voices in the crowd seemed to be reconsidering. "Reed told me himself that he killed my husband," Catherine continued, her voice softer now. "Nathaniel Harlow didn't die of consumption, as I'd believed. Reed poisoned him slowly when Nathaniel refused to help with his schemes." This revelation sent another shockwave through the assembly. Nathaniel had been respected in Copper Creek, his death mourned by many. "Why would Reed kill his own brother?" someone asked from the crowd. Catherine turned toward the voice, startled. "You knew they were brothers?" "Half-brothers," came the reply from Emilio Martinez, who had risen to his feet. "It wasn't a secret to those who knew Reed before he came to these parts. He changed his name when he arrived here, but old-timers like me remembered." "And you never said anything?" Catherine asked, hurt that this connection had been known to others when Nathaniel had kept it from her. Emilio shrugged his thin shoulders. "Wasn't my business to spread. Reed made it clear he didn't want the connection known, and Nathaniel never mentioned it either." Jenkins was growing visibly agitated, his hand hovering near his holstered pistol. "This is all lies. Reed was a good man who died trying to protect you, ungrateful." "That's enough, Jenkins," Sheriff Hudson interrupted, his hand now resting on his own weapon. "Mrs. Harlow's account raises some serious questions that need answering before we go charging off half-cocked." "We don't have time for this," Jenkins snarled. "The rest of Reed's men are already gathering at the South Fork. We're riding out at sundown to find the Comanche camp." This was news to Hudson, whose face flushed with anger. "You organized a posse without my authority?" "We don't need your authority," Jenkins replied coldly. "Reed deputized us months ago when it became clear you didn't have the stomach for what needs doing." "Reed had no such power," Hudson began, but Jenkins cut him off. "Tell that to the 30 armed men waiting for my return." His gaze shifted to Catherine, filled with malice. "And now I'll be telling them to add a treasonous white woman to their hunting list." Before anyone could react, Jenkins drew his pistol and leveled it at Catherine. "You're coming with me, Mrs. Harlow. You've got information Reed was willing to die for, and I aim to have it." Sheriff Hudson reached for his own gun, but froze when Jenkins swung the pistol toward him. "Don't try it, old man. I'll put a bullet in you without blinking." The church erupted in panicked voices as people ducked down in the pews. Catherine stood her ground, though her heart hammered in her chest. Jenkins returned his aim to her. "Outside now," he ordered, "or I start shooting these fine townspeople one by one." Catherine had no choice. She began moving toward the door, Jenkins following close behind. As they reached the exit, a voice called out from the back of the church. "That is far enough." Dakota stood in the doorway, tall and imposing in the golden light of the setting sun behind him. In one fluid motion, he knocked an arrow to a bow Catherine hadn't seen before. He must have found it at the Martinez cabin. Jenkins laughed. "You think that stick will stop a bullet, savage?" "I think you will be dead before your finger can squeeze the trigger," Dakota replied calmly. "My arrow flies straight. Does your hand?" The standoff stretched for a tense moment, neither man willing to back down. Then a new voice joined the confrontation. "Put down the gun, Jenkins." Sheriff Hudson had recovered his composure and drawn his own weapon. "This has gone far enough." Jenkins' eyes darted between Hudson, Dakota, and Catherine, calculating his odds. They weren't good. "You're making a mistake," he snarled. "Reed's men will burn this town to the ground when they hear about this." "Then we'd better make sure they don't hear about it," Hudson replied grimly. "Drop the gun, now." For a moment, Jenkins looked ready to risk it all. Then, with a curse, he let the pistol clatter to the floor. Hudson moved quickly to secure it and bind Jenkins' hands with a length of rope provided by one of the townsmen. The immediate danger passed. Catherine hurried to Dakota's side. "Where's Noshi?" she whispered. "Safe with Rosa's neighbor," he replied quietly. "I saw you enter the church and sensed trouble." The crowd was emerging now, expressions ranging from fear to confusion to outright hostility as they regarded Dakota. Sheriff Hudson approached them, his weathered face grave. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Mrs. Harlow," he has said. Jenkins wasn't bluffing about Reed's men gathering. "If they ride against the Comanche, it'll be a massacre." "Then we need to warn Dakota's people," Catherine insisted, "and stop Reed's men before they can organize." Hudson sighed heavily. "Easier said than done. I might be sheriff, but I've got maybe 5 deputies against their 30 guns." "You have more than that," Emilio Martinez said, stepping forward with Rosa beside him. "There are plenty here who never believed Reed's lies about the Comanche. We just needed someone to stand up first." He nodded respectfully to Catherine. Other townspeople murmured agreement, moving to stand with Emilio. Not everyone, but enough to make a difference. "If what Mrs. Harlow says is true," the doctor added, "then we've been complicit in Reed's crimes by our silence. It's time to make that right." Sheriff Hudson looked around at the determined faces of his townspeople, then nodded decisively. "All right then, we need to move quickly. Where are Reed's men gathering, Jenkins?" The captured man spat on the floor. "Go to hell." "South Fork of Blackwater Creek," offered one of the younger men in the crowd. "My brother works at the livery, said they've been gathering horses and supplies there since noon." Hudson nodded his thanks. "That's about 5 miles from here. If we ride now, we might catch them before they set out." "And what then?" someone asked. "You planning to arrest 30 armed men?" "No," Hudson replied grimly. "I'm planning to give them a choice, disperse peacefully or face the consequences of taking the law into their own hands." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was the only one they had. As the townspeople began organizing themselves, Catherine pulled Dakota aside. "This won't stop them for long," she said quietly. "Even if Hudson succeeds today, Reed's men will regroup. They want the map pieces too badly." Dakota nodded. "Which is why we must find the third piece while they are distracted." He looked meaningfully at Emilio Martinez, who was speaking with Sheriff Hudson nearby. "You think Emilio has it?" Catherine whispered. Nathaniel trusted few people. Emilio was one of them, a man who traded fairly with my people when others would not. It made sense. Emilio's connections to the Comanche through trade would have made him a natural ally for Nathaniel. "I'll speak with him," Catherine decided. "But first, we need to make sure Hudson has enough support. If Reed's men scatter before they can be confronted, some might head directly for your tribe." "My people are well hidden," Dakota assured her. "But yes, better to face this threat now than allow it to grow." The next hour was a flurry of activity as Copper Creek mobilized against the danger of its own making. Men retrieved rifles and shotguns from homes and businesses. Women prepared bandages and supplies, fearing violence despite hopes for a peaceful resolution. Sheriff Hudson organized riders, distributing badges to temporary deputies. Through it all, Catherine and Dakota remained at the center, providing information about Reed's operations and the lies he had spread. Not everyone was convinced. Several families locked their doors and refused to participate, but enough believed Catherine's account to form a substantial force. As the improvised posse prepared to ride out, Catherine found a moment to approach Emilio and Rosa Martinez. "I need to speak with you," she said quietly, "about Nathaniel." Emilio's dark eyes studied her face. Then he nodded once. "Come to our home after this is over. We have much to discuss." It wasn't the immediate answer Catherine had hoped for, but it would have to do. The third map piece, if Emilio indeed had it, would wait a few more hours. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Catherine found herself riding beside Dakota at the rear of Hudson's posse. The fate of Silverfall, of Dakota's people, and of their own futures hung in the balance of what would happen at Blackwater Creek. But for the first time since this journey began, Catherine felt a cautious hope. They were no longer alone in their fight, and perhaps, just perhaps, the tide was beginning to turn in their favor. The confrontation ahead would test that hope. Reed's men would not easily abandon their leader's quest, not when the prize was as valuable as the waters of Silverfall. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, the third piece of Nathaniel's map waited to be found, another step toward either protecting the sacred spring or exposing it to those who would exploit its power. Catherine's hand found Dakota's briefly as they rode, a silent communication of shared purpose and growing trust. Whatever came next, they would face it together, the widow and the medicine man, unlikely allies bound by secrets as ancient as the healing waters themselves. Blackwater Creek lay silent beneath the rising moon, its waters glinting like liquid silver. Sheriff Hudson raised his hand, bringing the posse to a halt on the ridge overlooking the creek's south fork. "There," he whispered, pointing to a cluster of flickering lights. "Reed's men." Catherine counted at least 20 campfires. They were outnumbered by more than 2 to 1. "They outnumber us," she murmured to Dakota. "Numbers alone do not determine victory," he replied. "The unexpected holds power of its own." Sheriff Hudson outlined his plan. Approach openly under a flag of truce. If shooting started, they would retreat to the rocks behind them. Catherine insisted on accompanying him. "They need to hear what really happened to Reed," she said firmly. Hudson frowned. "Too dangerous, Mrs. Harlow." "Which is why they need to hear the truth from me directly," she insisted. Dakota touched her arm. "Catherine is right. The truth has power when spoken by one with nothing to gain by lying." The sheriff reluctantly agreed, and they rode down the slope with a white flag held high. Halfway to the camp, a shout rang out. Men scrambled for weapons as lanterns were raised. "It's the sheriff," someone called, "and they're flying a truce flag." Harper, a scarred ex-cavalry soldier with cold eyes, stepped forward. "That's far enough, Hudson. State your business." Sheriff Hudson kept the flag visible. "There's been a misunderstanding that needs clearing up before men start dying for no reason." Harper laughed harshly. "The only misunderstanding is why you're protecting Comanche murderers and the woman who helped them kill Reed." "That's a lie," Catherine called out. "Reed wasn't killed by Comanche, and you know it." "Shut your mouth, woman," Harper snarled. "We found Reed's body." "You found what Jenkins wanted you to find," Hudson interjected. "Mrs. Harlow witnessed Reed's actual death. I think you boys deserve the truth before riding off on a vengeance mission." After a brief conference, Harper allowed Hudson and Catherine to approach. They dismounted before a group of Reed's lieutenants gathered around a central fire. "Say your piece," Harper said gruffly. Hudson removed his hat. "Men, you've been told Victor Reed was murdered by Comanche. That's not what happened." "Mrs. Harlow witnessed Reed's death," he continued. "She was there with a Comanche medicine man whom Reed had previously buried alive along with an infant." "More lies," Harper spat, though doubt showed in some men's faces. "It's the truth," Catherine said. "Reed attacked us in Black Ridge Canyon. During the fight, he and Dakota struggled over Reed's rifle. The gun went off, killing Reed instantly. Jenkins invented those details to incite you against the Comanche. Why would Jenkins lie? One man asked. To continue Reed's mission, a mission based on lies. Reed was searching for something in Comanche territory, something he believed would make him rich. When he couldn't find it, he became desperate. The uncertainty among the men grew visible. These were hired guns, not fools. Reed was dying of consumption, Catherine said softly, desperate enough to murder his own half-brother, my husband, Nathaniel, when Nathaniel refused to help him. This revelation shocked the assembled men. Many had known and respected Nathaniel. Reed killed Nathaniel, one asked incredulously. His own brother? Half-brother, Harper corrected automatically, then scowled. That doesn't change anything. He was killed trying to murder a woman and a man protecting his child, Hudson countered. That's criminal behavior that would see him hanged in any civilized court. Hudson offered them a chance to walk away. Return to your homes, your families. There's no future in continuing Reed's vendetta. And if we refuse, Harper challenged, then you'll be outlaws. This doesn't end well for you. A tense silence fell. Then from the darkness beyond the firelight, a new voice spoke. Listen to the sheriff, boys. There's no profit in dying for Victor Reed's lies. Emilio Martinez limped into the circle of light, supported by a walking stick. Harper's eyes narrowed. Martinez, thought Reed had dealt with you. He tried. All right, Emilio acknowledged, but it takes more than a beating to kill this old traitor. He addressed the men directly. Reed wasn't looking for Comanche raiders. He was hunting for a map he believed would lead to a miraculous spring with healing waters. Harper drew his pistol, aiming at Emilio. Shut your mouth, old man. A whistling sound cut the night air, and Harper's gun went flying, an arrow pinning his sleeve to a wagon. Men shouted in alarm, freezing as more arrows thudded at their feet. Dakota stood at the edge of the camp, another arrow knocked. Behind him, half a dozen Comanche warriors stood with bows drawn. The next arrow finds your heart, Dakota said calmly to Harper. Choose carefully. Sheriff Hudson seized control. Nobody move. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. After a tense moment, one of Reed's men stepped back from his weapon and raised his hands. I didn't sign on for this, he announced. Reed's dead and I ain't dinging for whatever crazy treasure hunt he was on. Others followed. Harper, face contorted with rage, spat on the ground. Cowards, all of you! No, Harper, Catherine said quietly, just men smart enough to recognize when they've been used. The resistance collapsed. Harper and a few loyalists were restrained while the others dispersed. Catherine stood beside Dakota, scarcely believing they had averted the bloodbath. Your people, she said to him as the camp emptied. How did they know to come? A slight smile curved Dakota's lips. I sent a message from the church. My brothers have been watching for my signal. Emilio joined them. Quite a dramatic entrance, my friend. Though I had matters well in hand, of course. Dakota raised an eyebrow. Of course, the arrow was merely punctuation. The unexpected humor startled a laugh from Catherine, releasing her tension. They had won, not just a reprieve, but a definitive victory. The immediate threat to Silverfall had been neutralized. We need to talk, Emilio said quietly, about Nathaniel's map. Catherine's heart quickened. You have the third piece. I did, Emilio replied. Come to my home at dawn. We can speak freely there. Despite her eagerness, Catherine recognized the wisdom in waiting. Dawn, then. And thank you, Emilio. The old trader shrugged. I made a promise to Nathaniel. I keep my promises. As they prepared to return to Copper Creek, Catherine watched Dakota with his Comanche brothers. Sometime during their shared ordeal, Dakota had become more than an ally or a connection to Nathaniel's past. He had become someone she trusted implicitly, someone whose presence filled a void she hadn't realized existed. But as Dakota returned to her side with Noshi sleeping peacefully against his chest, Catherine felt a certainty that transcended her doubts. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The Martinez home was quiet in the pale light of dawn. Catherine and Dakota approached from the creek path, having spent the night in a vacant cabin on the edge of town. Rosa Martinez opened the door before they could knock. Come in quickly, she said. Emilio is waiting. The cabin's interior was warm and fragrant, with the smell of coffee and fresh bread. Noshi quieted at the sight of Rosa, who immediately held out her arms for him. "Children know a grandmother's heart," she said, cradling the infant expertly. They broke their fast in silence, the simple food welcome after days of trail rations. When they had finished, Emilio leaned back in his chair. "Now," he said, "we must speak of Nathaniel and his map." Catherine placed her map fragment on the table. "This is the piece Nathaniel hid at our ranch. Dakota tells me there are 4 in total." Emilio nodded. Nathaniel was cautious. He divided the map, entrusting pieces to those he believed would protect them. "And he gave one to you," Catherine said. "Yes, I had traded with the Comanche for many years. Reed suspected I had it. That's why his men questioned me so thoroughly." Catherine winced, imagining what questioning at Reed's hands meant. "Before I answer where it is," Emilio continued, "there's something you should know about the third piece. It contains more than just part of the route." "What do you mean?" "Nathaniel built a safeguard into the map. Each piece shows part of the path, but the third piece holds instructions for a specific approach, one that, if not followed precisely, triggers a rockfall that seals Silver Fall's entrance permanently." Catherine's breath caught. "A trap." "A last defense," Emilio corrected. "If anyone with ill intent found Silver Fall, the entrance would collapse, preserving the waters forever, even if it meant no one could access them again." The implications were staggering. Nathaniel had been willing to sacrifice Silver Fall entirely rather than see it exploited. "The third piece," she asked. "Where is it?" Emilio rose and crossed to a shelf of pottery, selecting a simple clay bowl. Not where, but what. Nathaniel was clever. He knew Reed would search for paper. He turned the bowl over. "Look closely." As Emilio tilted it toward the light, Catherine saw faint lines etched into the clay beneath the glaze, a continuation of the terrain shown on her fragment. "The map piece is the bowl itself," she breathed, "hiding in plain sight." Reed's men examined it twice and saw nothing but an old Indian pot. "And the instructions for the safe approach?" Dakota asked. "Inside the rim," Emilio replied. "Written in Comanche," another of Nathaniel's precautions. Dakota examined the interior, nodding as he found the script. "It speaks of stones that must be avoided, steps that must be taken in sequence." He looked at Emilio with newfound respect. A worthy protection. Catherine placed the bowl beside her map fragment. Together they revealed much of the route to Silver Fall, though incomplete without the fourth piece. "With these 2 pieces," she asked, "could we find Silver Fall again?" Before Dakota could answer, Sheriff Hudson appeared in the doorway. "Jenkins escaped during the night," he announced grimly, "and he destroyed Reed's personal effects, including what appeared to be a piece of an old map." Catherine's stomach twisted. Jenkins now possessed at least one piece of Nathaniel's map. Combined with what they held, it might be enough to locate Silver Fall. "We need to warn your people," she told Dakota, "and secure Silver Fall itself." Sheriff Hudson looked confused. "What is this about? If Jenkins threatens folks in my jurisdiction, I need to know." After a hesitation, Dakota spoke. "There is a place in Black Ridge that Reed sought, a place sacred to my people, with water that heals in ways your medicine cannot explain." Hudson's weathered face registered surprise. "I've heard tales, thought they were just stories." "Not magic," Dakota corrected, "but something beyond ordinary understanding, something that must be protected." Hudson studied them both before nodding slowly. "What can I do to help?" "Keep searching for Jenkins," Catherine suggested, "and if something happens to us, make sure this reaches the right hands." She indicated the bowl and map fragment. As they prepared to leave, Emilio retrieved a small leather pouch from a hidden compartment. "Nathaniel left this for you, for when you sought answers about Black Ridge." Inside was a letter sealed with the sun and arrow symbol, and a small glass vial with a few drops of liquid. "His final attempt," Emilio explained, "to create a vessel that could preserve Silver Fall's power beyond the cave." Catherine secured the pouch inside her bodice. "Thank you, Emilio. He loved you very much, Catherine. Everything he did, the secrets, the risks, it was to spare you pain, to create a better world for you." These words soothed the lingering hurt of Nathaniel's deception. Whatever mistakes he'd made, he had acted out of love. With the bowl safely packed, they prepared to depart. Rosa insisted on providing food and small jars of herbs. "For the baby," she explained, and whatever else you may encounter. Outside, Sadie waited alongside a sturdy paint horse Emilio had provided for Dakota. He was Nathaniel's, the trader explained. It seems fitting he should carry a protector once more. As they mounted, Catherine glanced back at the town, awakening to a new day. This might be the last time she saw this place as Catherine Harlow, widow of Nathaniel. Whatever lay ahead would transform her. "Are you ready?" Dakota asked quietly, Noshi secure against his chest. Catherine nodded, facing the western horizon where Black Ridge rose like sentinels against the sky. "Yes, it's time to finish what Nathaniel started, to protect Silverfall once and for all." The journey to Dakota's tribal encampment took them through territory few white settlers had ever seen. They traveled cautiously, aware that Jenkins might be pursuing similar paths. When Noshi fussed, Catherine found herself naturally assuming the role of caretaker, creating an unexpected intimacy between them. On their second evening, while Dakota performed what he called a blessing of the stars with Noshi, Catherine opened Nathaniel's letter. Inside, his familiar handwriting filled a single page. "My dearest Catherine, if you're reading this, my fears have been realized. You've discovered the truth about Silverfall, a truth I should have shared long ago. When I stumbled upon it, near death from consumption, I believed it was chance. Later I understood some discoveries are destined. The Comanche trusted me with their greatest secret, and I swore to protect it. Then William fell ill. You cannot imagine my torment, knowing the water that saved me lay just days away. I broke my oath, stole water from the sacred pool. They caught me, imprisoned me. By the time I returned, our beautiful boy was gone. I've never forgiven myself. Had I been honest, brought you both to Silverfall when he first fell ill, everything might be different. Instead, my deception cost us our son. Victor discovered Silverfall months ago. He's dying, Catherine. The same consumption that took William. But he sees it only as profit, a miracle to be bottled and sold. I could not allow this desecration, even for my own brother. The enclosed vial represents my final work, a vessel to contain Silverfall's power beyond its source. It's imperfect, but perhaps a starting point for someone with greater knowledge. I believe that person is you. Trust Dakota. He fought for my release when William was ill. He understands that old ways must sometimes find new paths. Whatever path you choose, know that my love for you was the one true constant in a life filled with mistakes. With eternal love and deepest remorse, Nathaniel. Catherine read it twice more, tears flowing freely. The words were both vindication and heartbreak, confirmation that Nathaniel had loved her deeply, even as he kept her separate from a significant portion of his life. When Dakota returned with a sleeping Noshi, he settled beside her with respectful distance. "Nathaniel's words have brought you pain," he observed quietly. "And healing," she added. "Sometimes they're the same thing." "He wanted me to continue his work," she said after a moment, "finding a way to carry Silverfall's healing beyond the cave." "And will you?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to fully articulate. "First, we secure Silverfall from Jenkins," Catherine replied. "Then we can consider what comes next." Before they could continue, Dakota tensed, instantly alert. "Horses," he said quietly, many of them, moving fast through the valley below. They extinguished their fire and moved to higher ground. From there, they could see riders moving along the main trail, at least 8 of them. "Not my people," Dakota confirmed grimly. "They would not travel so openly." "Jenkins," Catherine whispered. "But how did he find this route?" "The map pieces he possesses may have revealed more than we thought, or he may have captured someone who knows these lands." They waited until the riders passed, then took a steep, challenging path that few would notice. By dawn, they reached Dakota's tribal camp. Teepees arranged in a circular pattern, everything designed to be moved quickly. Their approach brought warriors with bows ready, but when they recognized Dakota, word spread quickly. Dakota had returned, alive and with his son. Women emerged, children stared at Catherine with curiosity, and tribal elders came forward to greet them formally. "They honor your courage in rescuing Noshi and me," Dakota explained as an elderly woman presented Catherine with a beaded necklace. "You are welcome among the people." The moment of ceremony was short-lived. Dakota explained the threat posed by Jenkins, and the camp erupted into organized activity. An elder with deeply lined face, introduced as Grey Wolf, invited them to explain their situation more fully. He says the signs have been pointing to this moment, Dakota translated after Grey Wolf spoke. For many seasons, the elders have debated how long Silverfall could remain hidden in a changing world. And what did Grey Wolf believe? Catherine asked. He believed the waters were meant to heal, not to be hidden away forever. That is why he supported Nathaniel's quest to find a way to carry Silverfall's blessing beyond the cave. This revelation surprised Catherine. Nathaniel mentioned elders who opposed him. I assumed all your leaders felt that way. There has always been division among our people about Silverfall, Dakota translated as Grey Wolf continued. Some believe the water must never leave its source. Others, like Grey Wolf, believe the spirits would not have created such powerful medicine if it was meant to heal only a chosen few. Before Catherine could respond, a commotion at the camp's edge announced a returning scout. Dakota's expression grew grim as he listened to the report. Jenkins and his men are less than 2 hours away, he told Catherine, coming directly toward our camp. Grey Wolf issued instructions that sent the camp into rapid activity. The tribe will divide, Dakota explained. The elderly, children, and most women will retreat deeper into our territory. Warriors will defend the area. We will take Noshi and the map pieces to secure Silverfall. As they prepared to leave, the elderly woman who had given Catherine the necklace pressed something into her palm, a small leather pouch containing a tiny clay vessel sealed with beeswax. Through gestures, she indicated it was for Noshi. Within the hour, Catherine and Dakota were riding towards Silverfall. Behind them, the Comanche camp had vanished, as if it had never existed. The warriors, led by a Grey Wolf, would create a defensive perimeter, hoping to intercept Jenkins. As they rode, Catherine felt the weight of responsibility. They carried not just physical map pieces, but the hopes of Dakota's people, Nathaniel's legacy, and perhaps Silverfall's future. The path ahead was uncertain, but as Catherine looked at Dakota and Noshi, she felt a certainty that transcended her doubts. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As they approached Silverfall's entrance, Catherine raised her hand in warning. Fresh hoofprints marked the ground, leading directly to the narrow crevice. Jenkins is already here, she whispered. Dakota secured the horses in a sheltered alcove. They crept forward, Dakota with bow ready, Catherine with Nathaniel's Colt reloaded with ammunition from Rosa. They found a water canteen dropped in haste and scratches along the rock face. He has forced his way through, Dakota whispered, but he does not know the sacred approach. Inside, they followed the precise path described in Emilio's bowl, avoiding stones that would trigger Nathaniel's trap. They emerged into Silverfall's main chamber to find Jenkins and 3 men at the edge of the glowing pool. Jenkins clutched the 4th map piece and a glass bottle. "Jenkins!" Catherine called, stepping into view with the Colt raised. "Step away from the water." The men whirled, reaching for weapons, Jenkins' face contorted with rage and triumph. "Mrs. Harlow, you've saved me the trouble of hunting you down." His eyes fixed on her saddlebag. "Those map pieces belong to me now." "They belong to no one," Dakota said, emerging with arrow nocked, "just as Silverfall belongs to no one. It is a gift, not a possession." Jenkins laughed harshly. "Spare me your Indian mysticism. Reed was right. This place is a gold mine. Do you know what people would pay for miracle water?" "The water loses its power outside this cavern," Catherine explained. "That's what Nathaniel discovered before Reed killed him." "Lies," Jenkins spat. "You're trying to keep it for yourselves." He gestured to his men. "Take them. Kill the savage if necessary, but I want the woman alive." The men hesitated, eyeing Dakota's drawn bow. Catherine noticed one of Jenkins's boots resting on a trigger stone marked in Emilio's instructions. "Jenkins, don't move," she warned. "The stone under your right foot, it's part of a trap. Step off incorrectly and you'll trigger a cave-in that will seal this place forever." Jenkins glanced down uncertainly. More lies. "Why would I lie? If the cave collapses, we all die. Is that what you want? To die with your prize just within reach?" "If what you say is true," Jenkins said slowly, "how do I move without triggering this trap?" Dakota instructed him calmly. Jenkins hesitated, then carefully stepped away from the stone. As Jenkins reached safe ground, Catherine lowered her gun slightly. "The water is real, Jenkins. Its power is real. But it was never meant to be exploited. Those who try find only destruction, as Reed did. Reed was weak, Jenkins retorted, though less confidently. He had consumption, Catherine countered. Just like my husband, just like my son. He was desperate, willing to kill his own brother. Is that the path you want to follow? Jenkins' men exchanged uneasy glances. One stepped away. I didn't sign on for this, Jenkins. Reed promised us bandits, not whatever this is. Coward, Jenkins hissed. But another man joined the first, backing toward the exit. As his support crumbled, Jenkins lunged toward Catherine, knife in hand. If I can't have the water, I'll take the maps and your knowledge. Dakota's arrow struck Jenkins' shoulder. Catherine fired, her bullet catching Jenkins in the leg. He collapsed at the edge of the pool, blood seeping into the glowing water. The remaining men fled. In the sudden quiet, Jenkins lay gasping, his blood mingling with the sacred waters. Look, Dakota said softly, pointing. The water where Jenkins' blood had spilled was changing, the luminescent blue-green fading to dull gray. Yet as they watched, the pool seemed to purify itself, pushing the corruption to the edges where it dissipated. The waters heal themselves, Catherine whispered, just as they heal others. Despite everything, Catherine's healer's instincts took over. She examined Jenkins' wounds. He will live, but needs proper medical attention. And then, Dakota asked, he knows about Silverfall. He will tell others. Catherine shook her head. Who would believe him? A disgraced bounty hunter, spinning tales of glowing water? Without proof, his words will be dismissed as ravings. She turned to Jenkins. You have a choice now. Leave this place, never return, never speak of it, and live. Or persist and share Reed's fate. After a long moment, Jenkins nodded weakly. I'm done with Reed's obsession. Cost me everything for nothing. Not for nothing, Catherine corrected. For a lesson, some things are not meant to be possessed, only respected. With Dakota's help, she bound Jenkins' wounds. As Dakota secured him for transport, Catherine approached the pool. She removed the tiny clay vessel the Comanche elder had given her. What did she give you? Dakota asked. Catherine carefully opened it, revealing a paste glittering with the same light as the pool. Medicine, but not like any I've seen. Dakota nodded. Silverfall water mixed with special clay and herbs by our medicine women. It preserves the water's power much longer than water alone. Catherine's heart quickened. This is what Nathaniel was working toward. She retrieved Emilio's pouch with the glass vial. With your people's knowledge of the clay, my medical training, and Nathaniel's research, perhaps we could succeed where he couldn't. And you wish to continue his work then? The question hung between them, weighted with implications beyond Silverfall. To continue Nathaniel's work meant staying here, among Dakota's people, far from white society's conventions. Yes, Catherine said firmly, but not as Nathaniel envisioned. Not selling miracles, but bringing healing to those truly in need, regardless of who they are. She met Dakota's gaze. If your people would allow it. A rare smile transformed Dakota's solemn features. Grey Wolf foresaw this. He said Silverfall called to you, as it once called to Nathaniel. But where your husband was torn between two worlds, you stand firmly in both. He took her hand, and a gesture both intimate and reverent. The people would welcome a new protector, especially one who has already proven her courage and compassion. Catherine felt something shift inside her, a weight lifting that she hadn't realized she'd carried. For years after losing William and Nathaniel, she had merely existed. Now she felt fully alive again. And you, she asked softly, would you welcome me as well? No, she needs a mother, he said simply, and I would welcome a partner on this new path. One who sees the world as I am learning to see it, not as separate territories to be claimed, but as one land where all may find healing. Between them, Noshi stirred, reaching toward the glowing waters, the crescent birthmark on his palm reminiscent of William's. Nothing truly ends, Dakota said. The water flows, changes form, returns to the sky, falls again as rain. So too with spirits, and with love. Catherine's tears were different now, not grief-stricken sobs, but tears of recognition, of homecoming, of possibility. After securing Jenkins near the entrance and gathering samples of the clay surrounding the pool, They prepared to depart. Catherine cast one last look at the shimmering waters. She had sought answers about her husband's death and found something far more precious: a future. Silverfall would remain hidden from those who sought to exploit it, but its healing would find a way into the world through compassionate hearts. Outside, the sun was setting over Black Ridge. Catherine looked at Dakota, at Noshi, at the path ahead. For the first time in years, she felt the quiet certainty of being exactly where she belonged. "Let's go home," she said. And as they rode away from Silverfall, Catherine knew that home was no longer a place, but the people beside her and the purpose they shared: to be guardians of healing in a wounded world, protectors of a sacred trust passed down from those who came before to those who would follow after. Behind them, Silverfall continued its ancient flow, waiting for those with pure hearts to find their way to its shores, now and in all the days to come.